Week 17 of the NFL season, the penultimate weekend of the NFL regular season. The playoff race is getting more and more intense with each and every single week that goes by. For others that are not in playoff contention, it's about finishing the year strong, spoiling someone's playoff hopes, or at least sabotaging them a little bit, make them not so confident going into the playoffs. Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my Week 17 NFL predictions. I hope your Christmas was great. As we are closing in on the year 2023, we have a lot on the line in the NFL for this week and next week. I went 10-6 last week in my picks. Second straight week of getting double-digit wins, something I needed after 2 bad weeks. Without further ado, let's get right into the Week 17 predictions. As always, starting out with Thursday Night Football, Jets and Browns. The Browns have been resilient all season long, and there is a possibility, it's a small possibility, but the Browns could end up being the number 1 seed in the AFC if every little thing goes their way. We have a Jets team that we know is strong on defense, but their offense this season, it hasn't been what they're hoping for. Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles on the 4th play of their opening game. And this just wasn't the season for the Jets. The Jets at this point, they just need to salvage what they can in these final 2 weeks. Robert Saleh, we don't know if he's going to be one of those coaches that is on the way out. But I don't think it's the smart move for the Jets if they did that, even though, in my opinion, there really is no upside to having a defensive-minded coach in 2023 with the era we're in the NFL. But I think the Jets actually keep this game close. I think that the Jets defense can keep them in the game for quite a while. But of course, I am picking the Browns to win. But I don't always bring up spreads, only when they stick out to me. But I think this one at -7, I think it does stick out. Even though the Browns have looked like a serious contender with Joe Flacco under center, I think the Jets defense, they can make this a game. I think the Browns win, but I think the Jets, they may end up covering that 7. I think they have what it takes to do so. Either way, I am picking the Browns. Saturday night, Lions and Cowboys. Another spread that sticks out to me, the Cowboys are at -6, a 6-point favorite. And it makes sense to me why they are. Even though the Cowboys have lost 2 consecutive games, those are both road games. The Cowboys are undefeated at home this season. I believe they have scored more than 30 points in their last 7 home games in a row. The Lions are coming off an emotional victory over the Vikings on the road, clinching their first NFC North title since the 90s. And I am a little bit worried that I am putting myself into a trap by going back to the Cowboys when they've let me down the last 2 weeks. But I just think with how strong the Cowboys have been at home this season, I think it's really tough to go against them when they are the home team. The Lions coming off the emotional victory, they're feeling great, but I am going to side with the Cowboys in this matchup. We've seen them be a dominant force at home this season, and I think that continues. Patriots and Bills. The Patriots, an upset win over the Broncos on the road on Christmas Eve. The Bills, a game where it was a game that they just escaped with a victory, as that was a game that I did not expect to come down to the wire, but it did, and it happens. I was very surprised the Bills, they did not dominate in that matchup. And the Bills, they're a team that we haven't seen much of that dominance that we have seen in the previous couple of years. But the Bills are an 11.5-point favorite. And this is the third straight spread that sticks out to me. The Bills at minus 11.5. I get the Bills are at home this time around, as they lost to the Patriots earlier in the season. I do think the Bills, they win this game. But I just think 11.5 points, I feel like that's too many points for a team that we have not seen much in dominant fashion. I get they were dominant against the Cowboys. But other than that, it had been weeks until we saw the Bills perform in dominant fashion. And we've seen the Patriots put up valiant efforts quite a few times this season. I think this will be another game where their defense will play a valiant effort, but I don't think it'll be enough. I think the Bills win, but I think it's only going to be by a touchdown. I think the Patriots cover the 11.5. Falcons and Bears. We have two teams that have played well defensively most of the year. But the Bears defense, it has been a completely different defense since the trade deadline when they acquired Montez Sweat. Perhaps Justin Fields is performing in front of his future team, as Justin Fields happens to have the same agent as, I believe, Kyle Pitts, AJ Terrell, and Jesse Bates. Plus Justin Fields, it would be a return home from him, as he is from Georgia. But that is another topic for another day. Focusing on the game here, the Falcons won last week against the Colts convincingly. And this is typically what the Falcons do year in and year out. They don't look well through most of the year. Then once the season comes to an end, where they are nearly, if not out of playoff contention, they just start winning games. And I have seen a lot of Falcons fans talk about how they wish the Falcons, they would tank, where they wish they would lose games in hopes of removing Arthur Smith from the head coaching position. But I do not think it happens because of who the Falcons owner is and who the Falcons owner knows. But I do think they win this game because of their history of being almost, if not out of playoff contention, and they start winning games at the end of the year. But at the same time, every time I buy into the Falcons, they let me down. But I will pick the Falcons to win this game. This is a game I am fairly concerned about that I will get wrong, but it is what it is, though. Another game I'm worried about being incorrect on, Raiders and Colts. The Colts right now are favored in this game by 3 points, which sometimes you question why a team like the Colts would be favored over the Raiders when the Raiders have been playing well defensively the last 3 weeks. It's because of quarterback play, if I had to guess, because Aiden O'Connell only had 62 passing yards against the Chiefs on Christmas Day in that victory. And the Raiders, they leaned on the run game in Zamir White as Josh Jacobs missed his second consecutive game with a quad injury. Whether or not Josh Jacobs plays in this game or not, if Josh Jacobs plays, Antonio Pierce is going to rely heavily on Josh Jacobs. As right now the Raiders can still win the AFC West, a sentence I never thought I would be saying in late December. As ever since Antonio Pierce was named the interim coach, they have looked like a completely different team. The chemistry has looked really strong for the Raiders. Defensively the last 3 weeks, the Raiders have been near perfect and completely dominant. I'm going to pick the Raiders to win this game, as Antonio Pierce, in my mind, he knows what to say and how to say it to make it more clear and to make it look professional. And I admire that of Antonio Pierce. I would not mind if the Raiders made Antonio Pierce the permanent head coach, even though, as I've mentioned before, there isn't any upside to a defensive-minded coach nowadays. But I think Antonio Pierce is a exception for that. Antonio Pierce and maybe Robert Saleh. But I do think the Raiders, they do get this victory based off of their running game. The Colts, they had a hard time stopping the run against the Falcons last week. And we know the Raiders are going to run a lot in this game. Rams and Giants. The Giants on the losing end once again to the Eagles. Tommy DeVito was benched in that game for Tyrod Taylor. But the Giants, they kept it close to the end, only losing by 8. The Rams last played on Thursday night. A convincing win over the Saints. And for those of you that have tuned in all year long, about every single week I have acknowledged that I tend to favor more towards the team that played their previous game on Thursday night due to having extra rest in their favor. And once again, I'm going to be going in the direction of a team that played on Thursday the previous week. I think the Rams, they get to win this game, and I am personally not surprised that the Rams are in a playoff position right now. Where they're in a position to make the playoffs when a lot of people going into the year, they counted them out. Matthew Stafford getting older, Cooper Kupp getting older. But this Rams team has surprised a lot of people, but not me. I anticipated the Rams that they would be in a similar to exact position as they are right now. I think the Rams, they continue that playoff march. And I have them winning over the Giants. A Giants team that I don't know what to think at this point. Do the Giants go with Tommy DeVito again? Or do they start Tyrod Taylor at quarterback in this game? But the Giants, they have looked good at points in the year with Tyrod Taylor under center. So I'm thinking perhaps this is in their best interest to try Tyrod Taylor out and see if you want him as your backup quarterback next season. Cardinals and Eagles. The Cardinals, I anticipated that they would not win many games this season. And that has been the case. As Kyler Murray was out for more than 2/3 of the season, recovering from an ACL injury from last season. Right now, the Cardinals, they hold the second pick in April's NFL draft. And I think they will use that second overall pick on Marvin Harrison Jr. I anticipate the Cardinals, they keep Kyler Murray. Jonathan Gannon, I think in my mind, clearly wants Kyler Murray to be his quarterback. And they draft Marvin Harrison Jr. and pair him up with Kyler Murray. The Eagles got back on the winning page, winning against the Giants on Christmas Day. But for the Eagles and their fan base, it was a little too close for comfort, only winning by 8. But when you're a team that has lost 3 in a row, you will take any win any way you can get it. And I think the Eagles, they're confident again, and I think they win against the Cardinals convincingly. Saints and Buccaneers. The Buccaneers have looked great in these last few weeks. Baker Mayfield is having a strong season. Rumor has it the Buccaneers are working with Baker Mayfield to get a long-term deal. While the Saints, they have been inconsistent offensively throughout the season. And for that, I'm going to, believe it or not, pick the Saints to pull off the upset. Because I have a feeling the you-know-whos are going to know that the majority of the public will tend to favor the Buccaneers with how they have looked in recent weeks. And while the Saints, they have looked completely inconsistent, especially offensively, the Saints last played on Thursday night against the Rams, where they were inconsistent like they have the entire season. I think with that extra rest to their advantage, I think it will be enough to upset the Buccaneers by 3 points. I think this is my upset lock of the week right here. The Saints' rest will be in their favor for this matchup, and the majority of the people will be on the Buccaneers. And we know what happens when we see almost the entire public favor one team over the other. It's happened countless times, again and again and again, especially this season. And I think this one will be another one of those cases. I anticipate the majority of the content creators will be predicting the Buccaneers to win this game. But I like the Saints. 49ers and Commanders. And this one is a very simple one for me. The 49ers, they looked the way they did against the Ravens on Christmas night. Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions in that game, and the Ravens won convincingly. They go on the road to take on a Commanders team that is unconfident right now. There has been times this season where the Commanders, they've been able to stay in games and put points up on the board. Sam Howell was benched last week for a second week in a row. The Commanders are an unconfident team, and I think the 49ers, they bounce back. They handle this game easily. I think at the minimum, the 49ers win this game by 3 scores. I will be surprised if the Commanders keep it within 2 scores. As the odds makers, they have it at 13.5 for a reason. I think worst case scenario, 17-point victory for the 49ers. As the Commanders are going to likely move on from Ron Rivera at season's end. I think at this point, it's best to let Jacoby Brissett start in the final 2 games of the year and see what he has. But I do think they will continue with Sam Howell, even though they clearly aren't confident in him right now after benching him 2 consecutive weeks. Next up, we have the Panthers and Jaguars. For the Jaguars, quarterback Trevor Lawrence's status for this game is uncertain at this point, as he sustained an AC sprain in last week's game against the Buccaneers, in a game where it was unknown if he would play, as he was in concussion protocol. He ended up playing anyway, and he did not play great whatsoever. He had 3 interceptions in that game, or I believe it was 2 interceptions and a fumble. But he turned the ball over quite a bit in that game, and it was a big reason why the Buccaneers were able to perform at a dominant level. And now they take on the Panthers, the worst team in the league. But I will give it to them. They competed well with the Packers last week. And if C.J. Beathard is under center for the Jaguars, I think the Panthers have a chance to win this game. But knowing it's Trevor Lawrence, and multiple times this year we've had Trevor Lawrence's status be uncertain on game day, he ends up playing anyway, because he is somebody that is going to want to play in every single game, no matter what. I anticipate that even with the injury he has now, an AC sprain, he's going to try to play in this game. I think the Jaguars win this matchup, but I think they have got to use Travis Etienne a lot in this game. As we have seen in recent weeks, the Panthers' run defense gives up quite a bit of yards to running backs. I think if they got Travis Etienne going in this game, I think the Jaguars would win pretty handily. So I'm picking the Jaguars regardless if Trevor Lawrence plays or not, but we'll see if he does as we get more updates throughout the week. Dolphins and Ravens in what is without a doubt the game of the week, as this game is for essentially the number 1 seed in the AFC. Winner of this game will, in all likelihood, be the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs, which is massive. Having the number 1 seed means not only does the playoffs run through your city, but you're the only ones with a first round bye. And you could not have asked for a better matchup this late in the year with everything on the line. A Ravens team that has looked dominant all season long, even in the Ravens' losses. The Ravens are the only team that we haven't seen lose in dominant fashion. All their losses have been very close, and they ultimately could have less losses if John Harbaugh made some better coaching decisions earlier in the year. While the Dolphins, there has been all these narratives about them throughout the season. They were underestimating them coming into the year, underestimating Tua, saying Tua can't win without Tyreek, saying that the Dolphins, they can't win against a team above 500. But they have shut down those narratives. But I still think the Ravens are going to win this matchup, as the Ravens, they have been the most consistent team in the NFL all season long. Even with the Ravens' losses, none of them were terrible losses. I've really yet to see an overwhelmingly bad game for the Ravens this season, which they're the only team that you could say that about. Everybody else has had at least one game where it's overwhelmingly bad. And it's hard to pick against the Ravens right now. Lamar Jackson took the lead in the MVP race. And I think Lamar Jackson will even cement his case for MVP in this matchup. But I do think this game is going to be lower scoring than I think a lot of people are anticipating, because the Dolphins defense, it's underrated. Even though there has been some times this season where the Dolphins defense doesn't look like an elite defense, they have their moments. I actually think this game is going to only end up being in the neighborhood of 26-20. I don't think that we're going to see a high scoring game in this one. Titans and Texans. I remember when they played a couple weeks back, I talked about Derrick Henry's good history against the Texans. The last two games against the Texans, he has not looked great. And I don't know if it's signs of him getting older or if the Texans' run defense has just gotten better over the years. It could be some of both. C.J. Stroud did not clear concussion protocol last week, and he did not play in the matchup against the Browns. We'll see if he clears concussion protocol, but this matchup could be between Ryan Tannehill and Davis Mills, as Case Keenum was benched in the game last week against the Browns. So we don't know if it's going to be C.J. Stroud, Davis Mills, or Case Keenum under center for the Texans. I think this is going to be a pick where I feel like I'm walking into a trap, but I am going to pick the Texans. As the Texans, they have been finding ways to win games this season. The Titans, they are very unpredictable, as they are an extremely inconsistent team, one of the most inconsistent teams in the league, one of the most unpredictable teams. And I'm picking the Texans. But if Derrick Henry, he had a strong performance against this Texans team, I would not be surprised given his history. But recent history would show that he may not have a good game against this Texans run defense. Steelers and Seahawks. There was a comment in the comment section last week that said the most unpredictable team in the league is the Steelers. And there is an argument for that. Even though I do think the most unpredictable team in the league is the Titans, Seahawks a close second, the Steelers are without a doubt very unpredictable. Because even though the Steelers may not have the most talented roster in the league, they may not win the most amount of games in the league every year, the Steelers are consistently above 500. I probably shouldn't have said consistently, because every single season with Mike Tomlin coaching the Steelers team, they have finished above 500. And the Steelers were dominant this past Saturday against the Bengals. And the Bengals, they have been the best team for the Steelers. offensively, as the Steelers, they moved the ball at will against the Bengals last week. Mason Rudolph connecting with George Pickens on the second play of the game. 2 touchdowns for George Pickens after George Pickens has been wanting to be freed. He's been posting on Instagram saying, "Free me," or "Feed him the ball." 195 yards and 2 touchdowns for Pickens last week. As George Pickens, he has upside each and every single week to have big performances if you give him the ball. And I think the Steelers, they win this game, as we're getting towards that time in the year where the Steelers, they are dialed in to finish above 500, to keep Mike Tomlin's reputation of finishing above 500 intact. And I would not be surprised if teams did trade draft picks to get Mike Tomlin, as Mike Tomlin is one of those coaches you absolutely want in the NFL. Plus, the Seahawks are coming off of 2 consecutive emotional victories in last-minute touchdown drives, this time against the Titans. And I'm thinking the Seahawks' luck may run out, although this game, I think, just comes down to which defense shows up for each of these teams. As I think this game is either going to be a high-scoring game or a very low-scoring game, nothing in the middle of the road, but I am leaning towards the Steelers in this matchup. Chargers and Broncos, both teams looking to bounce back from losses last week on a game-winning field goal. Chargers to the Bills, Broncos to the Patriots. And I will give the Chargers credit here. They put up a valiant effort against the Bills in their first game without Brandon Staley, as they held their own in that game from start to finish, moving the ball at will on their first possession, as they did a lot better than I anticipated going into that game. I even remember talking about how I expected the Bills to win by a score of something along the lines of 40 plus to 10. I did not expect much out of this Chargers team. And the Chargers, they have a very talented roster, but Brandon Staley was not the right fit for that team. And hopefully the Chargers, they do indeed end up getting an offensive mind to develop Justin Herbert into building him into a top-tier quarterback in the NFL. While the Broncos, a slow start to the year, but they have been resilient. They have been winning games behind their defense. But the last couple of weeks, it has been tough for them ending this season. And I am going to go with the Broncos in this matchup. I do think that with this being a divisional game, I do think this will be a very close contest. But at the end of the day, I am going to pick who I feel like has the better defense, and that is the Broncos. Offensively, I think the Broncos, they have what it takes to make plays down the stretch when it matters. This is where I think it's going to be decided in the crunch time in the fourth quarter, with both defenses keeping them in the game from start to finish. I just got to give the edge to the better quarterback play in this matchup. Bengals and Chiefs, a game that is not as exciting now as it was in the preseason when we were reading off the schedules week by week. Joe Burrow being out for the season, the Chiefs' offense being lethargic pretty much the entire season, as frustration has been setting in more and more each week for the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes getting angry, was captured screaming at his offensive line. Travis Kelce was captured on the sidelines getting frustrated, just tossing his helmet on the sidelines. Absolute frustration. But this is another spread that sticks out to me. The Chiefs right now are at -7, and it sticks out to me because with how lethargic the Chiefs' offense has been, can I really trust them at this point to win a game of more than 7 points against a team that Even though they don't have Joe Burrow for the rest of the year, they have had to turn to Jake Browning, a team that has the ability to run the ball really well with Joe Mixon. Even Chase Brown has gotten into the mix throughout the season. I think the Bengals, they keep this game close. The last few times we've seen them against each other, it's been a 3-point game each and every time. And I would not be surprised if it was no different. I think the Chiefs win, but I do think there is value in taking Bengals +7. If you want to feel more comfortable doing an alternate line, I would say maybe Bengals at +10.5, because I truthfully am not sold on the Chiefs winning a game by more than 10 points at this point in the year. As if the Bengals can assert the running game early of Joe Mixon and even Chase Brown, I think it will be a long day for the Chiefs. Even though the Chiefs are second in total defense, I just don't know if I can trust their offense to get things going. Packers and Vikings to wrap up Week 17. Sunday night football. No Monday night football this week due to the college football playoff semifinals. The Vikings received more devastating news. Tight end T.J. Hawkinson out for the year with an ACL injury. Another injury to the Vikings this season, as this Vikings team has been dealing with injuries all season long. But they are still in playoff contention, and they go up against division rival, the Green Bay Packers. The Packers, it was a little too close for comfort for them last week against the Panthers, but they got the win. This late in the season, when you're in must-win territory, you'll take any win that you can get. And I could not think of a better way to end Week 17 with division rivals going against each other. This is essentially a playoff-like game, as the winner of this game will be eliminated from playoff contention. The Vikings, they have been resilient all throughout the season, but in these last couple of weeks, they have fallen apart. The Packers, a little bit of the same. But lately, the Packers, they have, well, really both these teams, they are starting to fall apart a little bit as the season comes to a close. As this feels like a tough call, but I'm going to pick the Packers in this matchup. Even though this is a road game, the Vikings are on a losing streak right now. At least the Packers, they have a little bit of confidence coming to this matchup, winning against the Panthers last week. And even though the Panthers are the worst team in the league this season, you'll take any win you can get when you have to win games this late in the year to make the playoffs. And that will do it for my Week 17 NFL predictions. Like, share, subscribe, comment your predictions down below. And this should be all I have for you this year. If anything, I might do a couple YouTube shorts if something were to happen in sports from now until the end of the year. But this should be my last video of 2023. I want to thank everyone for their support this entire year, as this has been the best year in the channel's history. Thank you all, and I hope you all return in 2024. Your support has been amazing this season, and it means a lot to me.